They vowed to protect our freedom, to protect our way of life, to keep our families safe from threats some of us could never imagine. And when the time came to transition back home, for some, it was to darkness. Shelter to Soldier brings post 9/11 combat veterans together with specially trained rescue dogs. We believe in saving lives two at a time and serve as a shining light in their recovery. Let's shine brighter together.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to our first thought leadership event of the year, Veterans and Logistics. So very exciting as we have a very important topic to discuss. It's also exciting that, we're actually, some of us are sitting here in the office and we're physically present. So pretty big change from our last event last November. With that, we'd like to start by thanking our panelists and our moderator for their participation today, but even more so for their service to our country. Speaking for all of Redwood, we are deeply appreciative of all of our military's members' service. Thank you. It's been said that logistics wins wars, but over the last 18 months, Americans have learned that logistics doesn't only win wars, it keeps our country running. When the pandemic first hit and people were waiting on deliveries for the empty shelves while they're trying to stockpile food or other supplies, or hospitals are trying to obtain PPE, or healthcare providers now who are trying to get vaccinations in arms, there's certainly a greater realization that supply chain logistics is the backbone of America. It's an industry that's fueled by a culture of hard work, perseverance, and problem solving. Maybe not surprisingly then, the tip of the spear are often veterans who have moved into this field. This is certainly the case with the guest speakers that we have here today. We hope to learn about their journey and their perspectives, how the corporate world varies from that of the military, and the application of various skill sets and positive mindsets. We hope to glean their secrets to success. But most importantly, we want to learn how we could better create opportunities for other veterans leaving service and coming into the space. So with that, again, I want to thank all of our panelists and everybody who's tuned in today. And I'm going to turn over to our moderator, Vernon O'Donnell, who is somewhere in Europe. I don't know exactly where Vernon, but take it away.
I'm actually in Amsterdam at the moment. First time in a long time, which is exciting. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vernon O'Donnell. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Project 44, which is a Chicago-based software company, a software platform focused on supply chain, transportation, and logistics, and bringing visibility to all modes and geographies across the world to make things more efficient. In terms of my own personal military experience, I enlisted in 1998. Largely to pay for college, grew up working class, but also had quite a few military members in my family, so definitely part of my family tradition as well. And ultimately, my experience culminated, I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 03 and 04. Certainly a life-changing experience on multiple fronts, but more than anything, it taught me about leadership, the ability to operate under pressure, and a lot of the skills and competencies I learned during my time in the service has played out in my time in software and technology roles that I've had throughout my career. So really, really excited to have this conversation today with everybody and the opportunity to really share and talk more about what we can do for other veterans as they transition out of their service experience and into civilian life. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk a little bit, to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his own experience.
All right, good afternoon. And again, welcome to this forum that we're going to share with you about the transition from military life to civilian life. My role started, or my military career started at Hampton University. I was an ROTC student. I went on active duty in 1985, where I was stationed in Mannheim, Germany. So I was in Germany for 3 years. And then after those 3 years, I made a transition from the military to a civilian career, which is now what we know as the supply chain. And I spent several years in the reserves while I was also in my corporate career. My last tour of duty was Operation Iraqi Freedom, like Vernon. I was there in 2003 and 2004. And what I would say that I remember about my time with the military, whether it be on active duty or reserves, I remember that what I loved about the military was the camaraderie, the relationship with soldiers, and the ability to be doing something different every day with a mission that was designed for the United States to win. So I'm excited to share here today with you about making a transition from the military into the supply chain, because there are a lot of similarities. I'm gonna turn it over to Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Andrew Leto. I'm founder of Emerge, my third company in the logistics space. And I started Global Trans, a big 3PL brokerage out of Phoenix. And my second company was 104.com, which was very much like P44 and Four Kites, but we sold 4 years ago to Trimble, and now I'm on Emerge, my third company. And my military background is I was in the Navy for 5 years, from 96 to 2001. And I joined right after the high school. Out of high school, I didn't have the grades to go to college. I was not an academic kind of guy. I would not really go to class my senior year. So the military enabled me to go to a night school, get my college degree, my high school degree, and then I did 5 years. I was stationed in San Diego, and I was a sonar tech in the Navy. And yeah, I didn't like it when I was in it, but it was the best thing I ever did in my life. It really helped me become, the last year I was in the Navy, all I did was read business books. I knew I was behind every college friend of mine. I was 23 years old, so I just literally sat in Barnes and Noble back then, we didn't have Amazon, and just read every business book I could get my hands on. It really helped me start my first company, Global Trans. So that's my story.
And I believe Chester is having some technical difficulties. So Gary, do you want to jump in and go next?
Sure, I'll be happy to go next. Good morning. I've been in the logistics for 42 years with senior leadership positions at Schneider, XL, Redwood, plus my consulting business. But my journey really started 49 years ago in 1972. Nixon was president, and the country was torn apart because of the Vietnam War. But as an 18-year-old boy and a freshman in college, I decided to join the Marine Corps. I walked into the recruiting office with hair down to my shoulders and started the best decision of my life. My active duty was from 75 to 79. Right after the service, I joined Schneider. But I would have never gotten a job at Schneider if it was only my education degree. Schneider was looking for military officers. Schneider took the easy route. They let the military do the heavy lifting to prepare me for the business world. Right away, I was given a position with 40 Teamster drivers, and less than 11 years later, I was the youngest VP at Schneider, managing 7,000 drivers. The Marines built my core beliefs, my discipline, and my passion that has been with me for 50 years. And then that's why I'm proud to be a part of this discussion today.
Hi, this is Chester Jones. Can you folks hear me? I am having technical difficulties, but with cell phones and ring lights, we can figure it out. My name is Chester Jones. I served in the United States Marine Corps during Desert Storm, Desert Shield. I was in aviation ordnance munitions technician, which was more logistics positioning of armament around the globe. I enjoyed my time in the Marine Corps. Actually, as I was in the Marine Corps, I was going to school at nights to be a dentist. And so you can see that ended in a field of logistics. Today, I am the Director of Supply Chain Operations at True Manufacturing. We are a commercial refrigeration company that makes a lot of back kitchens, commercial kitchens, reach-ins that you see in the grocery stores, bar back equipment. We make all of that stuff. We own about 67% of the commercial market in the United States, and we have operations abroad. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
All right, I think we got everybody introduced, and I forgot to mention what I did when I was in the service. I was public affairs, which means I like to talk, and I think that's why they volunteered me I was going to be moderating today. So with that said, we want to move to the first round of questions, and really one of the biggest themes or one of the biggest elements that we wanted to unpack today is that difference in structure from corporate America to the military, and helping people really understand how to move out of the military service into the corporate world. I'll share a little story myself. My very first job so I was military, then grad school, and then I went to Granger Industrial Supply, WW Granger up in the north suburbs of Chicago. I came in at a manager level, and it was the first time I'd managed anybody not in the service. And I remember my director pulling me aside after my first week on the job, because I'd made 3 of my employees cry, because I was used to, very direct and pointed feedback in the moment, corrective action, get it done. And he advised me that you can't manage 23-year-old fresh college graduates the way you do an 18-year-old private, which was something that I had a hard time wrapping my head around, but ultimately was a really important thing for me to learn. Was sometimes you need to soften the lesson and soften the approach in order to be successful in a different type of environment. So I want to turn it over to the group and get some of their experiences and some of their feedback on this topic. So Jeff, we'd love to hear from you first. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face or other veterans have faced when they transition back to civilian life?
Well, I think one of the things that I would say to start out with is that civilian life and military life does have its differences, but I do think that there are opportunities for people to transition smoothly. One of the things I didn't mention in the intro, I'm the logistics instructor at the Transportation Distribution and Logistics Academy, which is a high school that is training high school students for careers in the supply chain. I also teach as an adjunct at High Point University, which is also preparing students for their civilian career. One of the biggest challenges that I think most military people would experience moving into civilian life, into corporate life, is the fact that they operate different. So in other words, the structure of how they operate is different. For example, in the military, we pretty much know what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, who's going to do it, how it's going to get done. We have a mission. We know when the mission is complete. Transitioning into civilian life in the corporate America, it's not that same level of structure. But what I would tell you is that having the structure and moving into civilian life allows you to be able to lend all of the skills and abilities that you have to what you're going to do in civilian life. What I would recommend to anyone is to go in expecting there to be some types of challenges that you're going to experience. For example, everybody here on the panel will tell you that in corporate life, civilian life, they don't necessarily take time and value time like we do. In other words, if we show up to a meeting, we're going to be there 5 minutes early. We're going to surveil the room to make sure we know who's there. We're going to look around, figure out what's going on and get everything together. Whereas in civilian life, it's sort of a more casual situation. So you're going to have some challenges. And what I would tell you to do is to make sure that you prepare your mind with the expectation that there will be challenges so that when they come, you can figure out how you're going to best navigate those challenges that occur. The other thing that I would recommend is get a mentor. Get somebody who has transitioned already, who has been there for 2, 3, 5 years, and they've made a successful transition. Ask them how they did it and what may be expected. So what I would say is the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is that they're just not the same. Military life, civilian life are not the same. And you will find yourself asking people in corporate America, why are you so upset about this? Why are you so uptight about this? Because there are no bombs dropping out of the sky. There's nobody firing any bullets, and you're acting like the world is coming to an end, and that's not the case. So you'll have to manage that whole crisis situation, because what people in civilian life consider a crisis is not a crisis.
Yeah.
That's right. Speaking of that, Gary, how about what helped your transition back to civilian life?
Well, on the point made earlier, once a Marine, always a Marine. So I probably failed at the softening of my message. And I'm not sure if that's all bad, but I definitely think it is a challenge for somebody converting to the civilian world. Well, what made my transition so easy was Schneider. Schneider basically in the 70s and 80s, for their frontline associates, hired 70% military officers. So the entire culture of the company was like a military operation. They expected you to bleed orange, no different than how the military expects you to love your country and be willing to die for your country. So there was so much similarity there. They also have pretty clear standards. They didn't waver from their standards. They expected accountability. They expected people to have a passion for what they were doing. The other thing about the military that I think it teaches you is how do you leave your comfort zone? You're put in a lot of different situations that you have no choice. They're going to tell you where you're going to live. They're going to tell you what to do and when you're going to do it. So from the people in the military, they know how to leave their comfort zone. And so in some ways, the transition was just another duty station for me.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's and then Andrew, how about you? What was your time in the military like, and how did it impact you when you transitioned back to civilian work, especially having read all those business books?
Yeah, so Vernon, I agree with you on the, I would say the biggest thing that makes me different than someone that was in the military is that we got way thicker skin than people that weren't in the military, because the first 2 or 3 years you're in, you're constantly put down, this, everything you're doing, this sucks, you suck at this. And if you know, I noticed like in the business world, like, you know, especially with millennials, how soft people have gotten. And I've been told to tone it down so many times. But think about this, like, so when someone comes in and we're in technology and brings in a mock-up to me that's not that good, the first thing that comes to my mind is that effing sucks. And I say that, and it just doesn't go well with people. But in the military, you would say something like that. What are you doing? You are sucking at that. And that's how you do it. But when they do good, you're like, bam, you hit that. Wow, you're good. And that energy is that's what I like. That's how I'm at. But I've noticed that I tone myself down.
Yeah.
I totally tone myself down, because I know that that's not how college, they were not, people that didn't go to the military, that's not how they were talked to when they did some bad work. And so that's why I have a co-CEO, my brother, because he's the nicer one. Yeah, so but I can't, but if you do great work, I'm going to praise you better than anybody.
Yeah.
But
I hear you. I actually got advice once from another person I worked with, actually a mentor of mine. She's like, you start every meeting by going straight into the agenda and you expect people to just start working. I was like, well, of course, the meeting started at noon. Why aren't we starting the business? And she's like, sometimes you should start by saying hello to people and asking how their day is. And I was like, what a waste of time. We would never have done that in this service. We had stuff to do and places and people to be. Anyway, I hear you. It was the types of things you have to get coaching on coming out of the service are bizarre.
I think that too. Like when we started meeting, I'm like, okay, we have to do the small talk stuff. It's part of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to that. And you have to do that. First 5 minutes is small talk. It seems like people get comfortable.
That's right. Chester, how about you? Anything you wish civilians knew or understood more about veterans as they transition back from your perspective? You're muted, Chester.
Yep, I think all the panelists hit on a bit of my response. I think I really wish that civilians kind of understood when you transfer back that it's pretty scary to transfer back. A lot of things have been regimented or set up, and you kind of knew what to do. And so it can be scary to make that transition back because, one of the things I think veterans really have coming out of the military, we all have a sense of purpose, and it gives you that. So we can struggle with kind of translating military experience into civilian terms and those tangible skills. And I think employers have to kind of recognize and kind of help that, sometimes, when we come out too, we do need to deprogram ourselves a little bit as quickly as possible. Some of the resumes you see, they have all that vernacular. And sometimes, if you weren't military, you don't understand what this person's talking about while you search for their skills. But employers, they got to understand that we got good foundations as leaders. We're the first of volunteers. We typically, I think Jeff had mentioned on it, the things that are considered panic, we don't consider panic. So sometimes I think even if I'm interviewing or I'm trying to get into a particular field, I would just hope that corporations and civilians understood, hey, it's a scary transition for us. Maybe even if I'm not the fit for this role or this position, perhaps mentor me and even send me on and say, hey, Chester, you maybe won't fit this, but here's a couple things you could do and really support us there. So that's my biggest thing, is them having really understand that we need that assistance in the transition, especially when it comes to trying to get into the workforce.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's fascinating you say scared coming out of the service. I think it was more, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, what next? I guess I'm just going to go to grad school. So I had 2 years in grad school to figure it out before I had to go actually into the workforce. Speaking of like skills and training, outside of just direct logistics experience you'd actually have gotten in the service, what's some advice you'd give to veterans coming back? What's some things you learned? What are some other skills that you may have picked up along the way in the service that apply to corporate America? So Andrew, we'll start with you. What advice would you give to veterans as they come back into the civilian world?
As people come back into the civilian world from military?
That's right. Yep.
I would say tone it down. Like, don't be, especially in a work environment, you can't be the same way that your superiors were to you in the military, because that just doesn't fly in the corporate world. You won't go far, especially with HR. You'll get a lot of complaints. So you got to tone it down. And one of the cool things I think I learned from the military too is like how to manage a company. So on the Navy ship, so I was on 2 different ships, a destroyer and a frigate. On the Navy ship, there's a captain and there's an XO, the executive officer, and they're number 1 and number 2. The captain's number 1. The captain, everybody loves. He's the kind of the CEO of the ship, and he walks around and he's like God. You stand at attention. You respect him. He's nice to everybody. He says hello. And then the XO, the second in command, who, by the way, is going to probably be the next captain of another ship, is the biggest a-hole on the ship. He walks around and he looks at you, and everybody talks down to people. He's yelling at everybody. And it just made me think, oh, wow. So a CEO, you should, as a leader of a company or leader of an organization, you got to be loved by your people. And that's, I took that from that. And you definitely have to have a enforcer in your company. So that's definitely a big takeaway I took from how ships are managed.
No, I mean, that's a great lesson, right? Like, I always thought of it as the commanding officer is the one you loved, and then his staff sergeant was the one who had slightly different perspective in the unit. Yeah, totally agree. Chester, how about you? Different corporate work structures from military work structures. What are some of the skills you may have learned that apply to civilian life?
Well, I think my wife and I were having this conversation about this a little bit a few days ago, and she said one of the things she really liked about the military was the structure. She loved the structure of you had to escalate issues or concerns, even ideas. There was a structure to it, which I kind of replied. I thought that was a little bit of a downfall as well, because a lot of times, if you had that complaint about your next level up, you really didn't know how far that went. So the structure, I think structure is great. One of the things, I think it can be a bit downfall when it's so rigid, and we know that the military is rigid. But one of the things I found in kind of the corporate environment is that everybody's sometimes jumping around. Not to take anything away from them, but our company in specific, we are so kind of open, and I won't say not misstructured, but sometimes people that have no idea what the particular goal is or having ideas about it. So I think one of the things I see in corporate America is that that structure is a bit, I won't call it, there has to be professional courtesy, whether I'm doing issues or ideas or whatever, as long as I let my next level be aware, or especially being disgruntled, if they're aware of, hey, this is a situation I'm going through. And if they're not satisfied with my answer, they certainly can go speak to the next level. So I think, having the right structure, but not so rigid is a big difference that you see. And sometimes it can just seem frustrating to a veteran, right? Kind of seems like we're kind of loose. And I think the younger generation, some of the panelists touched on this too, they are driving that emphasis of work-life balance, where folks my age and older, typically we live to work, and they really only want to work to live enough, right? They just want to work enough to put in. So you have to, they're motivated different, right? You got to be positive. That negative and kind of, the marching orders, it just doesn't work. It's like hitting a brick wall. And you have to take time to explain why we're doing it and what we're doing. And we know, hey, do this. And military, we just did it. So those are some of the big things I see corporate compared to military, and especially in these latter probably 10 to 12 years. That the company I work with, if you ever look up the history of true manufacturing, started by World War II veteran, very rigid, very structured, and they realized in the last 10 years that wasn't going to work, that approach, and attract talent. So while we might find it pretty frustrating, you got to get on board.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, like work-life balance. I actually, and this is probably oversharing, I like to hire people who are ex-athletes and ex-military because they don't understand what work-life balance is. I have, so those of you who want to work at Project 44, if you played a college sport or you're in the service, I'm very partial to that because that work-life balance concept doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
My wife was an athlete while I was in the service. So anyway, definitely hear you on that though, Chester. So Gary, how about you? Military skill sets applied to your career. Again, outside of that logistics space, what did you take away from your time in the Marines when you came back into Schneider?
Well, to me, a lot of the discussion so far is been on the military person transitioning to a company. It's also the company making sure you pick the right company that knows how to have someone from the military transition. Because if you think about someone that's 18 years old, enlisted when they maybe had gone into the military, or 22 or 21 when they're an officer, and then they serve 4 years. I can guarantee that the age group of 22 to 26, the most prepared group in the world is those that come out of the military. No one has been tested as hard as they have been tested. In some cases, maybe no one has failed as many times as they've failed, which is an unbelievable learning experience. And no one has the passion and love and commitment. Try to find a person on the earth that's not a military person that right away will take a low pay or horrible living conditions and do it for 4 years. It doesn't happen. And so, what I see is the company deciding when they really look at a veteran, and they should look hard at a veteran because of what they bring to the game. Do you have fair expectations? Are you expecting something more than what a veteran is able to bring to the party, or maybe expecting not enough? And as a veteran has been said on this call, they need to tone down. In some cases, maybe the company needs to tone up and set a higher standard. Because looking the other way, checking the box, doesn't work for a military person. And so the skill set is really their learnings that they've gotten over 4 years. They maybe don't even realize that they're so more advanced than others coming into the workplace.
Spot on. Totally agree. Jeff, what are your thoughts on it? What type of projects do you enjoy? Or where did you excel? Maybe asked differently. When you came out of the service, what were those things that you really knocked out of the park and accelerated your career based on what you learned?
Yeah, so I was kind of fortunate. I had a military officer or junior military officer recruiter assist me in transitioning out of the military. So they were looking for junior military officers. They already had corporations and companies lined up where junior military officers could go into supervisory positions based on their background, sort of like what Gary said. I mean, I was I was in the active duty for 3 years, and then I was transitioning to corporate America. But basically, the companies were saying, you're already qualified to be a supervisor, so I could just put you in there because you'll be able to handle whatever we have for you. So I started out as a distribution management trainee. I worked in the traffic department, the warehouse department. Then I moved over to managing distribution centers, and by the time my 30 years was up in corporate America, I was the manager of global transportation for Haynes Brands, the company. So with that position right there, I had the opportunity to manage, projects that were large and global. And what I tell everybody and what I tell my students when I teach them is that the thing about the supply chain is there is no 2 days that are the same. When I show up in my office and my phone rings, there is no one calling me saying, thank you, my shipment arrived on time. Everything was there. I just don't get those calls. Every time I got a call, it was somebody looking for me to make something happen. And I think that's what made the supply chain a good match for me, because that's the way the military is. We don't know what the next thing that we're going to do in a military situation. A lot of times in transportation supply chain, it's the same way. You're dealing with shipping clerks, you're dealing with drivers, you're dealing with trucking companies, you're dealing with all of them. But what I liked the most was the fact that when they called me, they had a problem. And that military background gave me everything I needed to help them solve the problem. I'll give you one example. At Haynes Brands, t-shirt companies, socks, bras, t-shirts, panties, innerwear and underwear. We had some t-shirts, 42 cases of t-shirts that needed to be in California the next day in order for them to be there for the Disney marathon that was happening somewhere in Southern California. I'm sitting in North Carolina. It's raining cats and dogs, and that's where the 42 cases are. So all of you that are in logistics knows it's not a problem. Just put them on a plane. Well, this is after 9/11. So I went by the airport and they were like, no, we don't know you. We're not gonna let you put 42 cases in this plane. So to make a long story short, I had to charter a plane to go pick up 42 cases of Champion t-shirts to go to California. They had to pick them up in Laurel Hill, North Carolina, which is way out there, not near any major highway. I had to fly one of my corporate people, or actually a corporate person had to drive to that little airfield in Laurel Hill, North Carolina. She had to get on a charter plane with 42 cases and fly them to California for the marathon. I had to arrange in California a shipping company to go to the tarmac where the cases were and take them to where they need to be. That's an example of a project that came up. It's not the normal thing, but again, for a military person, it's all about putting all the connected pieces together and making it happen. So those are the kind of projects that I liked, and that's how I got involved with Redwood and other carriers, because they were just an extension of what we were able to do for the company.
Yeah, it's fascinating you say that. I always think about it in terms of the types of crises we deal with every day in logistics. They require urgency and a sense of action, but in comparison, it's not a bomb. So maintain calm, figure it out, get it done, keep it moving, right? I think that's always one of the things I can really coach my team on. So one thing that a lot of people have in common, and different reasons, we have different reasons why we joined or enlisted or got our commission, but there's always a kind of a theme around teams and being part of a team, and a team that particularly makes a difference. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that with the group. One note before I kick it over to the panelists for questions. We do see the questions coming in, and we'll make sure to address those at the end. So please continue to put those in there. They're not being missed. We'll just circle back to them at the end, given time considerations. So going back to the team discussion, Chester, would love to hear, how do you think about a team that you want to be a part of? What projects do you want to be a part of? And how important is mission? How important is difference, making a difference to you as you consider that?
I would say it's making a difference and being part of the projects and the right teams are crucial in the supply chain and logistics operations. the daily grind is always there when we kind of go down to, the manufacturing. I'm supposed to ship these orders out today. I'm supposed to make these units today. I'm supposed to do all these things. Well, we all kind of show up even in the supply chain and say, hey, I know that these things are supposed to happen today, kind of that daily grind of things. But the overarching kind of goal of supply chain and logistics is to have a value proposition that delivers bottom line benefit to the customers, the client, the shareholders, and the company. So it's always we're always in that position of improving ourselves, of looking for kind of the next challenge that actually brings benefit to the company. And it's a continuous loop. Once we make these improvements this year, find these efficiencies, what do? We go right back through that loop. And all the while we're addressing those things that Jeff brought up. Where's my shipment? Why hasn't the truck showed up? When will these parts be ready? But I think, overall, we have to have a value proposition that adds value, and we have to keep going through that loop. The big thing about those projects or those improvements that you kind of touched on is they have to be in alignment with the company goals and strategies. So if the company, if it's not important to the company that X happened, then I shouldn't go off and tout X as this big improvement project and go after it. So, for example, here at True, we have what they call 4 pillars of excellence: quality, efficiency, safety, and sustainability. So down through the supply chain organization, when we develop improvement projects or initiatives, we align those initiatives with the company initiatives so that we make sure we're in alignment and we're delivering value. So again, cross-functional teams that are high performing, but we are looking for solutions that add value to the bottom line of the company and that are in alignment with what's important to the company.
Makes total sense. Jeff, what are your thoughts on it? What makes a team successful in your opinion, Jeff?
I think that if I was to put it into a one word, I would say relationship. I mean, if you have and develop the correct relationship with people that you are on a team with, there's really not a whole lot you can't achieve as long as people have the skills and abilities, which most times if you put them on the team, they're going to have that. So for example, my first day in the military, my first actual military job, I'm 21 years old. I'm a second lieutenant. I walk into the unit and I have all of these people that now report to me. Well, but let's be honest, I'm just like, I'm there. It's my first day. I am showing up as a second lieutenant in charge of a dining facility, a motor pool, and all these other places. And I don't know anything about any of that, but I'm supposed to be the one to pull the team together. So ever since that beginning at 21, all the way, for the 30 years I was in corporate America, I've always found that if you build the right relationship with the people, even if the people are twice your age and have more experience than you do, there's really nothing that you cannot achieve. And I think the military does a great job of giving you the leadership skills to build the appropriate team, because in the military, I mean, as an officer, I was always, concerned about the enlisted soldiers that were a part of the unit. I always made sure that those enlisted officers had what they needed so that the mission could be done. Same thing when I transitioned over to corporate America. When I transitioned over to corporate America, I made sure that the people that work for me, I'm the supervisor or the manager, I have 50 or 60 people. I made sure they understood that I had their best interest in mind. So one of the things I always did, I told people, I'm in management, so I'm not going to be here forever. I'm going to be here for 3 to 5 years, and then chances are I'll be transitioning to another role. But while we're here, let's make sure that you as the employee get exactly what you need to get out of this job. So I would actually go and interview my employees and say, look, we got 3 to 5 years. Tell me what it is you want to do. Tell me who you want to be. And if I asked you what do you want to be doing in 5 years, what do you want to do? And what we would do within the framework of that environment is we would work, together to get that person where they needed to be. And I told him, I said, I know you've been here 15 years and you're a valuable employee, but if you want to do something else, let me help you do that. And me having that ability to help them do that made it such that when I had important things that need to be done, I always had people that would do it because I had made deposits into their life. So now I'm asking you to work overtime. Now I'm asking you to work on a Saturday or a Sunday. I'm asking you to do something out of the ordinary, but by making the deposits and giving them something as associates and team members, it always made it so that we can get accomplished what we needed to get done.
One thing that struck me as you were talking, I was thinking about my own service, and when I think about what made a successful team, it was like we didn't always get along, right? Certainly, many times in our units, but there was always a confidence of, I knew they went through the same basic combat training, the same AIT. They went through all of the same training regimens that I did, right? And they had passed with various degrees of success. And so there was a confidence in knowing, even if you had personality clash, the team was well trained and well structured and had clear roles and delineations, which I think is, actually an opportunity for a lot of corporations to learn from the military, right? Train your people, give them clear outcomes, give them the clear roles and responsibilities, and set them on that path. That's the best way to make a team out of a lot of diverse components, a lot of disparate parts, and you end up with a really, I think, an even more diverse and interesting workforce in that when you take that approach in the civilian world. Andrew, how about you? What do you think about in terms of organizations attracting, recruiting more veterans, leveraging them in logistics specific careers?
Yeah, I don't think any company does it well. I remember when I got out, there wasn't like, go here and you could go find a job with your skill set. So I don't really think that, and it's not really a good place to go and find it. And, so I just don't have a good way to do it right now. We don't have like a source of logistics. I wish we could find, if anybody knows something, if there's a posting board a military posting board that works, but I just don't. I didn't have it when I got out, and I don't see it out there now, a way to funnel in veterans, which I would love to do, because I know that they went through 4 to 5 years. They showed up every day. They committed to something, and that's, to me, the best, one of the best parts of character that I like. So if anybody has an idea, let me know.
Yeah, honestly, I appreciate your candor always, Andrew. I totally agree. I don't think anybody does it well. We struggle with it. I do. It's all word of mouth, right? Like people I know and random happenstance and introductions. There's not like a systemic way, or at least we haven't found one yet either. And I've worked in multiple industries, so certainly agree with you, and definitely open to the ideas. The
military doesn't help either because they don't want you to leave. So it's not like they're trying to figure out, hey, how do we get these guys working afterwards? So they don't care.
That's right. Any other panelists have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thought was that one of the things that helped me out, and I don't know, I think Gary might have mentioned it when we had a discussion a couple of days ago. There was a company called Cameron Brooks. So as a young military officer in Germany, this company, Cameron Brooks, came over, and they were specifically designed to come over and find junior military officers to transition into corporate America. So they really, that was their specific role. And I don't know the relationship between the company and Cameron Brooks, but I do know that when I went to this meeting, there were 600 junior military officers in the room, and they just told us point blank, we're only we can't help all of you, but we can help 1 out of 10 of you. So about 60 people in this room, we're going to be able to help. And, and they transitioned us through the process, but they also told us in that process, all the rest of the people that were there, what they needed to prepare themselves and what they needed to have ready. So when the transition occurred, it would be great. Now, on the corporate side, I think the way to do it is to let somebody go and do that for you. Because if you don't have the ability to decipher what the military person would be able to do for you, go find a consultant, because there's somebody out there that will do that for
But there's a program we did at Schneider that I started back in 1988. And it was because of that issue. What happens with a veteran when they get out? Do they go home and do they set for 2 or 3 months because they deserve it? But that 2 to 3 months becomes 4 to 5 months to 6 months, and then they've all of a sudden lost the value of their military experience. So we created a program called GEAR, and it was guaranteed employment after release. And that was trying to get to the veterans while they were in service to think about, so what are you going to do next? The other thing is it's hard to market a veteran if he's in Germany and you need him in Toledo. And so the real campaign that if I was running an HR group and I wanted to hire veterans in Toledo or Northwest Ohio, I would be asking the question, how do I market us as a company who wants to hire veterans and has desirable jobs for veterans? So what you need to do is you need to promote yourself in your community, because in your community, the family members, the significant others, the friends are going to call you in Germany and say, hey, when you get out, you need to start thinking and researching these companies. And so I don't think people will spend too much money on trying to attract veterans, but in reality, it just needs to be targeted. And it needs to be clear, what is the job you're asking them to do? And if you can put the energy in there, I think you will start to see veterans that transition out. And you really would like to get as many as soon as they're getting out, not 6 months after. They've lost the luster. Doesn't mean they lost their skill set, but they've lost some. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, and I agree that Gary and Jeff kind of hit on a couple of good things. I mean, when I got out the military too, there was not a transition. But one, I did have to start, you looking forward and saying, I am going to get out the military. And so I had to start making that plan then. And a lot of it was much like Gary talked about, start talking back in the community about my plans, where I'm going to be, aligning with other veterans I knew had gotten out before me, and what you do, how'd you do it, who'd you converse with. So making those contacts to help me, get there. And a lot of times, and I got lucky a few times where the jobs I was seeking just happened to be ex-military folks as well. So a little bit of that helped, but I think, you have to start looking at it in advance and tell yourself really, and I know sometimes situations put us out of the military before our when we weren't planning on it, but the best I can do to plan for that and start really trying to, who can help me from a consulting standpoint, from a community standpoint, and use those resources. And we didn't have internet back then either, but in prep for this meeting, I've kind of thought about that question. I just kind of Googled companies that like to hire veterans, and boom, a list with stories come up. McKesson, Boeing, all these companies just pop right up that say, hey, we have targeted programs and different things to hire veterans. So at least our resources out there now. You can Google anything now, right? As soon as somebody asks a question, we go Google it. We're all bright. So you can get out there and maybe find some information if you plan forward.
Yeah, great points for sure. So with 8 minutes left, we wanted to move over to the audience questions and address those really briefly, and then bring it home. So wanted to flip over to this, and I think this piggybacks on what we were just talking about. And if I say the name wrong, please, I apologize. Kyrie Bloom asked about, does the military help with the transition to civilian life? Certainly there's some degree of career training, and it's gotten better, certainly from when I got out 17 years ago, and certainly from some of your longer timers. I don't know, does anybody else have anything to add to that conversation we were just having about the transition to civilian life and the military role and how they help?
That was 42 years ago. I can't help you on that one.
I think we're all a little dated on that one. There you go. Chris put a great comment in the panel. I was actually going to say, maybe this is something we could do as a follow-up, because I think we're all, I'm 17 years out, so it's been a minute, but I do know that they've put more investment in that. And then there's a comment there in the panel. So Mark, and then there's some more too. Lisa mentions the USO and Hiring Our Heroes have done a lot of work and have a lot of valuable resources for that. So certainly a lot of organizations doing a lot of good on that front. Mark Doage asked, served a similar timeline to Chester, was curious to hear about our views on civilian executive politics. And then potentially if anybody had been through a RIF and what that meant for later transitions after that first role or second role out of the service. So I guess from a civilian executive politics standpoint, I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that front.
No, I mean, I would say that, there's a rank structure everywhere, right? And there's some politics about things. So certainly you expect that you gotta kind of carry yourself and work through that. One thing about corporate, we one company, one team, but there's a lot of competition when, promotions and recognition and those things, where some of that might be built in military, right? If I did my time, if I performed well, and did my duty, I might be in line for that promotion. Well, a lot of times it's a little bit more rugged out here in the corporate world. So I think you just have to be ready and understand there's structure and there's politics and everything. You got to navigate them. And, I hadn't really been through a rift at all since I got out the military. But I think you have to, again, you got to kind of go to your gut, and those things that made you successful in the military, you have to kind of gut through those and get right back on the horse. The saying out there is you were looking for a job when you found this one. So you'll find the next one.
Jeff, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was going to add that I have gone through a reduction in force or a reorganization, whatever they called it at the time. But after 14 years, at the company, they told me, I had overstayed my welcome, so it was time for me to do another transition. And I think what I recommend that people do when they make a transition is, whatever you do, realize that when you work in corporate America, everybody's really like a free agent. You're a free agent every year. You're a free agent all the time, so you should be making preparation all the time for what would happen next. I mean, in other words, make a contingency plan. What would happen if? So what I did from the beginning was I always established those great relationships, not only with the people that I work with in the company, but I established it with all the people that I worked with and the vendors that I work with externally, so that when the reduction in force came, I actually had one of the vendors that I worked with actually provided me with an employment opportunity based on the history that we had in working together, in a different type of relationship. So what I would say is just to make sure that you develop, solid, great relationships across the board, so that if the opportunity ever presents itself that you need to transition, you have people that you can pick up the phone and call.
Yep, that's right. That's key. And then developing additional skills and competencies. Totally. One last question here, and then we'll wrap it up. So another one from Kyrie. Veterans who suffer from PTSD and have a service dog, do they have a place in corporate logistics? So big question. I can at least say from our standpoint of Project 44, we definitely have a highly flexible work environment in terms of meeting everybody where they are and what their needs are. I can't speak for all the organizations certainly, but I know that more and more, particularly if you think about the technology space around logistics, having people who suffer from a variety of disability situations is becoming more adaptable and more flexible and more receptive. So I don't know if anybody else in the group has anything specific on that. I don't know if there's a broad answer here. It seems like it's probably gonna be very company by company specific.
Yeah, I think most companies are very liberal about these things now.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't think that's even a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't even bat an eye. So I think obviously Emerge is a very progressive company technologically, and so are we, and I'm sure some of the other ones on here too. So to wrap up, wanted to thank everybody for their time today. I think the panelists, I know how busy you all are, and it was great you all took an hour, and thank you Redwood for inviting all of us. And we definitely want to mention the Shelter to Soldier charity that's attached to this. So we're going to share a link to the webpage. Please definitely go out and donate to that. It helps connect veterans to service animals, and actually ties very much to that last question, particularly those who have PTSD and other residual issues like that. And it's a great cause. So please click the link, learn more about that, donate more to the organization. And with that said, I'll turn it back over, and I think we're going to wrap it up here. So
I have a joke about Marines, since I'm in the Navy, so we have a little back and forth.
Yeah, go for it.
You can always spot a Marine in a bar in civilian clothes, because this is how they look.
Yeah, and don't forget.
Well, it's lucky we had you to give us a ride.
Yeah.
Oh, the haircut's a dead giveaway too, usually. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Hopefully this is a great use of everybody's time. Really appreciate the attendees and the panelists, and have a great afternoon, evening, and rest of the day.
You too. Thank you all.